thing about having Brian, by the way, is that we talk loud when he's around.
We do, yeah. Brian was loud. He started us off at high volume.
We're mumblers.
We are mumblers, but good morning, everybody out there, our listeners. This is Faith Over Breakfast. My name's Andy Littleton. I'm sitting here with Eric Deepen. Say hello, Eric, again. Hello, Eric.
Hello.
Eric's with a church called The Village in Tucson, Arizona. I'm with a church called Mission Church in Tucson, Arizona. We're sitting up at the loft at XO Coffee, which is a place we like. They have great food and beverage. Today I am having a muffin that is excellent. Skipping out on the full breakfast today for whatever reason. Eric's not drinking coffee. Brian's not here. He is going to be gone for a long time.
Long time.
Long time. So everything's just changed. It's all different. No caffeine, no breakfast sandwich for me. My coffee's the same.
Yes.
Everything is in upheaval in the world. And what do we do? Where do we go from here?
I don't know. But we probably should start with how's your dad doing?
How's my dad doing? Yeah, so for if you didn't catch the last podcast, my dad has been diagnosed with cancer, went in for surgery, and he is home as of last night.
Oh, wow.
He's home. Yeah. So he's still uncomfortable. There's a lot of stuff to figure out, but he was released from the hospital. He's eating normal food,
so that means he farted, because that was the big part of the podcast.
Yeah, the big goal was that my dad would fart for a while in the hospital. So Faith Over Breakfast, here we go. We're talking about farting.
Let's just get that out there.
Yeah, let's get it out there. So, that was the big goal. And my dad, who never jokes about that kind of stuff, we got him to crack some smiles about this in the hospital, Like,
that's good. That's good.
Yeah. So things are moving. Things are happening. Dad's home. But we gotta follow up with this cancer care stuff.
Yeah.
There's a lot to figure out. So, if you pray out there, feel free to pray for my dad, my family. He's kind of scared. The whole thing. My mom's nervous.
What's your dad's name?
Leroy.
Leroy. So pray for Leroy.
Pray for Leroy. And check out that last podcast to hear more about our dads. That was an interesting conversation.
It was a very interesting. People have commented some on it.
Yeah. It was good. I'll share it on my Facebook page and stuff like that. I need to put it out there a little bit more.
Yeah, well, because we missed that one podcast, we're down listeners, and
oh man,
so we got to start promoting.
Yeah, right.
Get people out there listening to us again.
Yeah, our consistency has gone down, but I think my consistency in life was down for the last couple of weeks. So sorry, people, and deal with it.
Yeah, that's the way it is.
We're guys. We're not always consistent. We're pastors, but sometimes we don't make it to the meeting. Whatever. Yeah.
We don't make it to the meeting.
But another thing I want to jump into really quick before we head into our topic today. Today I brought up we've changed it up real quick here at the last minute. Brian was going to be with us. We were going to talk about some stuff that was on his mind. We were going to talk about him, but he has successfully avoided that. He says he's working. I think he is just running. I think he's on the run. He doesn't want to talk about himself. That's what I'm gathering.
I'm thinking I'm going to take that interview that you did with him, and I'm going to clip it.
Okay.
And maybe put out clips of little interviews with Brian. Through the year.
Okay.
That he's gone to kind of
Yeah. I think that's a good idea.
That'll be fun.
So Brian's not here, so let's who votes to approve that motion? I. Oh, look, it's done. Okay, there's only two of us here. Sorry, Brian. Anyway, and I want to talk about this sexual harassment stuff. I mean, this is you got Harvey Weinstein, you've got the hashtag Me Too movement, and I don't know. I've been thinking about it. It sounded like for you, this wasn't like the big thing on your mind this morning, this week, but it's on the mind of our people, our churches.
Sure,
it's a big thing, and I have to say that this morning. I'd read some things last night, and this morning it was kind of on my mind because I've got some. I don't know. I'm just kind of trying to work out some of the stuff in my head. Some of the responses of some people I know. So
sure,
we're gonna get into that. I'd love to talk at the end of that. So don't let me forget. I would love to talk about, how we in our churches and Christianity see finding a solution or working toward healing.
Sure.
In these areas, but
Well, it seems like that'll be peppered in for the whole conversation, is my guess.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, of course. But first of all, your village conference.
Yeah, it's happening coming. November 2nd to the 4th, and in fact, this week is really my last week of regular work in the sense of meeting with people and that kind of thing, and prepping, because I really need to sit down and put in the hours to like refining what talks I'm going to make and helping out with whatever details we need to put together, and it's kind of weird because we've had this thing that's coincided with the conference that's relatively cool but also stressful, and that is that the Hilton over on Broadway, I think in Pantana, has donated floor after floor after floor of furniture to the village. So we're talking maybe over, if you were to pay full price for all of it, maybe over $1 million worth of furniture.
It's crazy.
So now,
how did that happen? Sorry.
We just we have a guy.
You just know somebody?
We have a guy in our church who is heading up the entire electrical part of the contracting, and so he just asked for it, and they said, sure, we'll give it to the church.
That's crazy.
If he can deal with it. So he's got to recoup his costs because he's using his men to do a lot of the shipping. Yeah. But we've been handing out like a ton of furniture to people at the village, so that's all happening this week. We have like 300 mattresses.
Wow.
I mean, we've become a mattress store just like that.
Dude, there aren't enough mattress stores here in Tucson.
Oh, I know. I mean, those are all drug funds, so those aren't really mattress stores.
Yeah, they must be a front for something.
Right. Yeah. Man, so I don't know. So, like, that's a little stressful in the coordinating of things and stuff like that. We have a huge, like, Connex that just got dropped off, and we're having, I think, 3 more pods that are going to land at our church.
So it's being delivered to your church?
Some of it will, to get... because we got to put it on Craigslist, and we're going to start selling it. We're looking at, hotel liquidators to just take huge chunks of it and stuff like that. So,
is there any cool Arizona hotel art?
I don't think we got any of the art. Okay. I think most of the art there are moving to other places. But if you're looking for inexpensive mattresses and furniture and stuff, just keep an eye out.
Who knew Faith Over Breakfast was going to be a plug for inexpensive mattresses?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
But some of the furniture is gorgeous. I mean, we're talking really nice. In fact, we just put 13 couch chairs into our sanctuary. So it's pretty sweet. They're really comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been fun. But it's been stressful for both Chris, who's running it, and... but hopefully we've got some people in the church who are really good at doing stuff with Craigslist and selling, and they'll get going on that. And hopefully the liquidators will take big chunks of it for us and just write us a check.
That is an insane project.
It isn't insane. What we're hoping, I mean, the thing that we're asking God for is that could you sell enough of this furniture to pay off our building? Mm-hmm. And so that's somewhere around $80,000, $90,000. But who knows? Even if we got half of that, it would be incredible. But...
man,
we're hoping that God will do something like that. So that's there's a conference, and you're starting. I'm at the freak out level when it comes to a conference, because I begin to think I don't really have anything. I don't have anything to tell anybody. Like, what if this all bombs and it's dumb, and so I'm just having a.
What if it does, man?
Yeah, what if it does?
What are you gonna do?
What am I gonna do? I don't know. It'll be hard. I'll have to have some counsel and take over breakfast afterwards. I'll tell you what I'm gonna do. I planned a trip already to Seattle. Oh. And Sue and I are flying up there afterwards, just to get away. I haven't been there in like 3 or 4 years, 5 years, and that's
back where your ministry began.
Yeah, well, I think that was part of it, and then it's just in November. My wife just loves Seattle, and she just wanted to be there. It's healing for her more than even for me, and so I just thought we need to go. We need to spend the money and go. Which I have a hard time parting with the money that I saved.
Yeah,
I'm not a. Why am I paying money to fly somewhere?
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's where we're at with all that. But I'm excited. I think the conference is going to be fun. And what I really think is going to be cool is that in some ways our church, a lot of them will attend, are going to hear like, okay, well, this is this is the underpinnings of why we've been doing that thing. So
some of it they've just been immersed in, but they haven't heard it all worked out for a little bit. Yeah.
So some of that hopefully will open their eyes to things, and they'll get to be part. So.
Well, I'm banking on it not being a total bust.
Okay.
I'll be there, and
because you will be there.
Well, no.
That's
No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I'm going to be there, which means I don't think it's a total bust. Right. I was going to be out of town for the first part, but that didn't happen. So I'm going to be there for the whole thing.
Cool. So you'll get to hear my opening talk. It'll be fun.
Yeah. Which I was hoping for. I didn't want to just be there for the last day and kind of miss the. I really want to learn from you guys. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of content built into the first 2 days. So
yeah,
be good.
That's awesome. So anyway, you have Village Conference 2017.com. Is that right?
Yes, Village Conference.
Village Conference 2017.com. Yeah, go check it out. Anyway, so there's this. Let's jump into this. Let's jump into sexual harassment stuff. So it's interesting. I mean, I can't help but admit right on the front end that, it feels to me. I mean, here's Harvey Weinstein's been, caught in his ways, right? And then, but I mean, for goodness sakes, like we got a president who is guilty of it, like big time and publicly, and everybody knows. I mean, we've got it's like this is a pervasive. This has always been an issue, but it's pretty interesting that you currently got somebody being thrown out of the Hollywood establishment.
Yes.
But meanwhile, you've got somebody elevated to the top of the power structure of the United States of America doing the same thing. On social media, you've got especially women, but a lot of folks are telling their stories and saying, I've dealt with this too, either telling the story or acknowledging they have a story.
Sure.
And then there's a lot of, essentially, like, I think there's the stories are being told, but then the question is, what do we do? I mean, when you've got people at the top of the nation who are, sexual harassers, but that's always kind of been the case, to be honest.
Right.
It really is. And then, I mean, this is an issue that, so now that we're acknowledging it and we're talking about it, and the hashtag will be gone in a little bit.
Right.
But here it's hot. It's on the presses. What do you think in light of this? And what do we do with it? And what's the inherent conflict? I think as pastors, we're not supposed to just look at things on the certain. Nobody should just look at things on the surface level.
Right.
But our role is to go, okay, hold on, let's dig into this. Let's look deeper into this. So what are
my deep thoughts on all this?
What are your deep
thoughts? Well, my deep thoughts are, to start out with, is that everything, and for the people who know me and sit and talk to me in my church are going to just roll their eyes, but everything starts with power.
Yeah.
And power always is abused when it's let free.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're a man or a woman. The problem is that men have held the power for the majority of history and for the majority of the cultures. There's a few cultures where women hold power, but it's very few, and far between. So what we're faced with is a lot of men who have power that's unchecked.
Yeah.
And when it's unchecked, our sinful nature and our sexual desire are given free rein, and you begin to believe that you deserve and are owed things. And so that on the top level is what, you're just seeing power run rampant.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think the issue becomes, for me, when I think about all of this, is, well, what does the gospel say to power? Like, how do I speak against this? I can say it's wrong.
Yeah.
But what I've learned, I think what I'm learning is that as a follower of Jesus, my job is just to say this is wrong, but more importantly, my job is to stand with those who have been victimized.
Yeah.
And not just that, but to join in their victimization, to like stand between it, to understand it, to is what you were saying before the podcast, claim my own participation in it.
Right.
So those are things that we have to begin to talk about. The question becomes, how do we do it?
Yeah.
Like, how do we actually do this? Because what happens is we jump on Facebook and we type in "Me Too."
Right.
What I've learned as a pastor is that sexual abuse, forget harassment, sexual abuse is so rampant both with men and women.
Yeah.
That one of the things that we don't realize is just how many men have been abused and taken advantage of as children and as young people. And then, man, I would say from my experience, at least half of the women in the U.S. and probably more worldwide have experienced some form of sexual abuse or sexual harassment.
In my mind, I'm thinking half. I bet it's more.
Yeah,
right?
and we could probably push it up. And depending on how you define those terms, we may be up to like 99.9%.
Right. Yeah.
But the impact of this in women's lives is very destructive. And so, like, we were talking about Hugh Hefner, and what women have found is that, and it's very true of an oppressed person, is you take the thing that people want and you use it for your power. So sexualization, you take that and you use it to control and have power over men. And so now you have this really weird culture where we're trying to fight to protect women while they're the one that's being victimized. So they're using the very thing that we're trying to, like, nurture and care for, their sexuality, and using it for power.
Yeah.
So they're actually, there's a brokenness in their victimization. So we're caught. You were saying we're caught in this place. Like, what do we do with this?
Yeah.
How do we deal with this in our culture?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking about referencing, or before the podcast, there's an article I read on Hefner by Ross Douthat. It was in the New York Times, kind of an op-ed piece. And he was kind of dealing with the fact that we can't decide what to do with these people, and we should be able to, but we can't because we have these conflicting values. So Hugh Hefner, if he was raised in this puritanical, strict environment, and so a lot of people see him as kind of a poster child for breaking free from Christianity, right, and its constraints, the terrible constraints of Christianity, and living free, unencumbered. Saying like, look, these are my urgings, these are my longings. This is who I am. This is who we are as humans. We're sexual beings, and he blew that open and made it acceptable to people. And a lot of people look at that and say, "Thank you." That's right. Even though it's but it's confusing, right? Because in a way it's thank you, but then in a way it's going. People are going, but there's something sort of still feels kind of dirty.
Right.
And especially Ross Douthat got into Hugh Hefner's life got increasingly more dirty as he got older. He didn't become a better man. He became a creepier man.
Right.
And that there's something that means something. We should look at that. We should consider that. Where does this lead?
Right.
But we can't. But then you start calling it wrong and dirty, and then, but on what grounds? Like what's wrong? What's dirty? The only way that you can start defining things as wrong and dirty is to start accepting some of those things that Hefner broke away from, like kind of pure motives, like so Puritan. They were trying to be pure, right? And so, then if you're asking people to be pure and not dirty and to not objectify anybody, then you're putting constraints back on people. And what about our freedom? And there's this it's complicated. And so Ross Douthat was getting into the fact that we should be able to condemn Hugh Hefner. We should be able to look at Hugh Hefner and say, no, not okay. Like, that's objectifying women. That is not the path to freedom. That's not freedom. That leads you, it led Hefner to being a pretty grimy, creepy old man. That's not freedom.
Right.
Living in his house with the urine everywhere and the drapes all closed and hiding with pornography on repeat on the televisions. I mean, that's not freedom.
No.
And so anyway, but we don't have categories for this. And so, the same folks that are saying like, this objectifying of women isn't okay are struggling because then if you're going to accept all these standards that people have to live by, where do you get them, and what happens to your freedom?
Right.
And so there's just a tension. And he said, look, we're so conflicted on this that we put a Playboy in the White House. And the reason that Hefner, I would say, I think he rebelled against Puritanism because rules don't change hearts. And I think he rebelled against the rules.
Right.
And I think that a huge portion of our nation feels the same way. And so I actually wonder if the more we condemn, though I think we should, I think things need to be wrong, but the more that we condemn sexual assault, if there's not going to be this uprising of rebellion, and, Donald Trump's just the beginning.
Right. Well, so along those lines of what you're saying, our nation, forget this, sexual harassment. Our nation has become divided.
Yeah.
Right? We can no longer be friends.
Right.
With each other. And part of that is because before, even though things have always been messed up, in our culture, it's been a Judeo-Christian culture, meaning all that really means is that we said there's a greater law that we can appeal to when making decisions. So there's a justice that we can have, and when there's justice, we can have friendship. Because there's something we can appeal to. And it goes back to the Nuremberg trials. Why are you doing this? Well, this is the laws of the land. We didn't violate our laws, and so there has to be a greater law. So
there must be a greater law,
right? Yep. And so they have the in that courtroom. They have the 10 Commandments on one wall and Adam and Eve on the other. There's this idea that something greater that we appeal to. I think the reason that the only way that someone who's been abused or harassed can love and care for someone who abused and harassed them is if justice happens.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
A relationship happens with justice, and until we embrace Jesus, we can't be friends.
Yeah.
Jesus has to take the justice has to happen, the consequences. He's the one who takes the punishment for my stupidity.
Yeah.
And then I can love you because the price has been paid for your sin against me and my sin against you. And so we can begin to work our relationship out with that, with the cross. And so
work that out a little more, because I'm thinking I know Christians listen to this, but I know people who are figuring that out are listening. So to make that statement of we need Jesus, why Jesus and not any of the numerous other religions out there? Why?
I think my experience. So if you and I are friends, and we are friends. And if our friendship is just around this podcast and the fact that we have similar jobs and we're like each other and we hang out, I guarantee you at some point you're going to hurt me.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And if you haven't already.
I already have.
And I'm not going to ever forgive you for that. Yeah. Right? I might say, oh, it's okay, Andy. Yeah. But always it will come back.
Right.
Because there's no justice in our relationship. I can't make you pay enough for what you've done to me. We know that internally, that there's got to be some kind of consequence for the pain, but we can't figure out what that is. It's confused. You say something mean to me, and then I'm like, okay, I'm going to punish you, so I'll hit you in the face.
Right.
That's not going to, I'm not going to feel like justice has been meted out.
Because even though you've inflicted pain on me, there's no restitution for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's nothing.
Yeah. You still don't get, say, worst case scenario, I took the life of someone close to you. Okay, you put me in an electric chair. I'm gone. You still don't have that person. There is no. You have not been restored.
No, I have not been restored, and neither have you.
And neither have I. And now there's just.
And if
you've exacted revenge.
Yes,
but that doesn't equal justice.
And following Buddha is not going, because Buddha's going to tell me to work harder and to place my feelings somewhere else, to separate myself from them.
Yeah.
And when Buddha died, he was, work harder.
Yeah.
And that is the mode of most faith, even if it's not a religious faith, a secular faith. It's always work harder. Believe in yourself. None of those things work. Only Christianity says the restitution, the forgiveness, all happens in the death of Jesus and the victory over that death. Because we all know that the only thing is going to resolve it is when you die and I die and we don't think about it anymore. Like that, and we just become dirt. Yeah. That's it, unless there's something else. And I think that But what makes our relationship work around the cross is that when you said something mean to me, like you can, if you understand that Jesus died for that, you can come sit, you can understand my pain.
Yeah.
You can connect to the pain that you caused me, and we can find forgiveness in what Jesus has done. I know that seems abstract, but it's powerful. It's a thing that changes us.
Yeah, I've been thinking in light of the hashtag #MeToo because, I'll say really quick, I'm not big on like getting into the social media frenzy on these issues, at least not in the way of typing 140 characters or whatever.
Right,
that doesn't seem to go well in general, but especially not, I don't know. I watch pastors do it, and you just get a big explosion, and I don't know what good it does. But when you can work something out and hear the intonations of somebody's voice, and it's something different. But I was proud of a couple of guys from our church who, because we've been talking a lot at our church. In fact, this last week we talked about sexual immorality, it's a tough topic, but we talked about how the gospel changes the way that we view other people and makes these things just feel utterly out of place. And it makes them sickening to us, even though they're a part of us. And then when we feel how sickening this part of me is, but then see that God entered into human history and said, I will take the sickening parts of you. I will take your, porneia, the word for sexual immorality. I will take the justice for all of your porneia on myself.
Yes.
I'll be treated like an abuser, though I was not, so that you can be forgiven. And when you see that, everything's true about you, it's all true. You're sexually abusive. In your thoughts, words, and deeds. That idea in the scripture is so pervasive. It means like, even if you just have the slightest hint of objectifying somebody in any moment, that's sexual immorality. That you've taken somebody's who they are and their body, and you've not treated it with all the respect and dignity and as just a beautiful creation of God, as a sister, as a brother, as a mother, as a father. If you haven't thought of somebody in that way consistently all the time, then you objectify them, and you are guilty of this. And so if you see that truth, that Jesus then suffered because of that, and then comes to you and says, I will cover over that sin. Now what you're able to do is you are able to admit who you are and what you've done, but not be riddled with guilt and shame where you can't move forward, and you can actually admit who you are and what you've done to people, and you can change, and you can heal, and you can bring healing in those relationships by admitting it. So a couple guys at our church, I've noticed, have on social media said, I do this. Sure. Even if you don't view me, I'm no Harvey Weinstein, I guess, but in my heart I do this, and I'm sorry. And I'm proud of them for that, because that I know that they're doing that because they believe in the gospel, because they have the guts to admit it, because they know that Jesus is covering them in their shame, and so they don't have to hide and act righteous, act like, I don't do that. Who would do that? Unbelievable, Right. Oh, Hugh Hefner, unbelievable. They're going, oh man, in my heart I could go there. I could be Hugh Hefner. In my heart I'm Harvey Weinstein. I need grace. I need forgiveness. I don't want to walk in this, so I'm bringing it into the light. Right. And that's the amazing thing that the gospel does that is so different. It's so unique.
It is. And I think we have two interesting tracks. One that you're talking about is, how do we live out as men and women in the church together, and care for each other, and learn to be sexual beings, who honor one another. Yeah. Because the reality is, some words that you said, like when I don't honor a sister or brother as a beautiful, power, whatever the adjectives you want to use that are holy, like we've tried to divorce sexuality from our humanity in order to be able to be good brothers and sisters.
Right. Yeah, act like that's not there, which that doesn't work either, does it?
Right, and so I think it's very confusing for us, especially when you're younger. As you get older, you begin, obviously, even the hormones and the chemicals change in your body, and so how you understand yourself in context to your brothers and sisters is different. But, so we haven't developed a good language to talk about that.
Yeah.
Just in the church. But then we jump into culture where, sexuality is on every commercial.
Oh, yeah.
And it's in every show.
Yeah.
And it's in every part of our culture. And and there's no picture of something healthy.
Right. And then we're surprised that the maker of the English Patient, off screen is also sexually immoral.
Right.
We're surprised by that, right?
We are. Well, and I don't know, was it in this podcast that we talked about the culture of hookups? Wasn't that?
Maybe.
I thought we did. And just the way that our culture has gotten to a place where sexuality has even been divorced from relationship. Yes, we did talk about that in these podcasts. So we're so messed up. So for me, when we see the Me Too, I'm like, well, I think what we need is to say, okay, not only have I been sexually harassed, but I have harassed.
Yes, right.
Like that nobody.
Even if you don't think I have.
Right.
Yeah.
Nobody has not participated in this culture that's a perversion. Now, there are places where it's very exaggerated.
Yeah.
And where power, where we can take our power and use it to dominate other people and get what we want in that area.
Right.
So what do we do as a church?
Yeah. But it's, what we can't do is just clip the tops off the dandelions, like in just eradicating the big situations. And when it's in the powerful place, that's not, it's there because it's pervasive in all of our hearts. Like, we have to get down to the root of this within ourselves and within, and I don't think we have the power to do it. In and of ourselves. The interesting thing that I was toying with a term before this, that I was trying to get at what, it's confusing because one thing I've noticed is that the new trend, and I would say my circles, I don't hang out most of the time at this point in my life with like conservatives. Right. I grew up in the church, and so there's that in my history, but by and large, it's just not those aren't my circles. It's not my friend group. So I don't feel like I'm in that world. And so the interesting thing for me is, I understand like the religious right and the fundamentalist, because I've been around those folks in my life. But in the last at least 5-6 years, I'm not really around those folks. But I've noticed that the method for change in the community I'm in now is the same.
Yes.
It's exactly the same. And we don't see it, and these groups, the fundamentalists, would look over at, people I love and hang out with now and go, oh man, they're not righteous. They don't do the right thing. They don't live under the right standard. And the folks that I love and hang out with now, and I'm not sure how to classify that group, but who would say like they've rejected fundamentalism and everything.
Right.
But they're looking over at the religious fundamentalists and stuff like that and saying, you're not righteous, in a different language, but saying you're hypocritical. You don't do the right thing. You obstruct freedom. You push down. You oppress. You do these things. And then even in this situation with the sexual harassment, the message I'm hearing is unbelievable. How could you? This is wrong. This needs to stop. Okay, so my term for it is secular Puritanism.
Right.
Because Puritanism is this idea of saying you just need to do the right thing. And that's not, the old Puritanism, it wasn't that simple, of course. But the the base idea, like what Hugh Hefner rejected, was toe up, do the right thing, stop it.
Right.
Don't act out. And he went, and everything within the core of his being rebelled against that. And he said, no, I will be myself. I will live for myself. I have desires. People have desires. We will not repress who we are. I will be who I am. We will be who we want to be. And that's exactly what happens when you try to govern people's actions with rules. And so this sexual puritanism that I see, or secular puritanism, is, I don't think it's going to work. And I kind of want to tell my friends, like, getting on social media and telling people, stop it, this is wrong, how could you? At the end of the day, like, what you're going to do is there's going to be a whole segment of society that hides more.
Right.
They're going to hide their sin more. And this sexual stuff is going to happen behind closed doors more.
Right.
And it's going to be more infectious. And the rebellion is gonna be greater. And you're going to see, a group of liberal and conservative folks who say, I will not be restrained.
Right.
I'm a sexual being. This isn't inherently wrong. It's who I am. It's my animal instinct.
Right.
It's lock or talk. I'll do what I want. And you can't judge me. Don't judge me. How often do we hear those words?
Right.
And it's not going to work. So what's the alternative?
It's a good question.
Right?
Right.
And so anyway, I just I guess I want to talk through that. Like, we're used to couching it in Christian terms, but I'm saying this is like, I think this is a cultural, especially Western cultural issue, is that we as a culture we haven't learned that governing with the rules and saying you should be pure right now doesn't change hearts.
No. And I don't know if we ever can.
I know.
In culture.
No, you're right. You're right.
Because we go back to Puritans, that's what they believed.
Yeah.
They believed that they could create a utopia.
Yeah.
Bringing the kingdom to bear now in a fullness. So I don't. But
so maybe one thing we need to do, though, is say we've got to pull the rug out from under this idea that you're going to create righteousness, however you define righteousness, right?
Right.
Like, we might define it one way according to the scriptures, but you might define it, when you think of your ideal world where everybody gets along the way that they should, to think that you're going to create that by imposing standards of purity and asking people to obey them, it will not work.
Right. Well, I think it's so Mosaic, and I'm going to forget his name, Erwin McManus.
Yeah.
He talks about, what if we did not rate churches by their success by how big they were, but how the crime rate was in their city,
right?
And basically how people were taken care of, how the sexual harassment levels were in their community. And I think that's revolutionary in this sense, is that I don't think most churches view their role is to create leaders, but not leaders to fit into ministries,
right?
But leaders
in the community,
so that they bring the gospel. See, well, I think we've been bringing the leaders we have created in the past. As we've been bringing the rules.
Yes, we have brought our version of Puritanism,
right, instead of the gospel.
Yeah.
And what's happened is, and there are people out there like Vander, whatever, the Soma churches, those people, they're trying to create something they call gospel fluency. There's the Gospel Coalition. This is this new movement.
Yeah, Vander Stelt, Gospel Fluency.
Yeah, all these guys. And I love their work, but I think they're just begun. I don't think they have... I think they're all trying to formalize it a little bit too much, but they're doing a good job. They're making the shift. The train is moving, or they're trying to move the train. But we as churches have to say, okay, how do we create leaders? And everyone is a leader.
Yeah.
Everyone. Our kids are leaders. And it's not the gift of leadership. It's not we're all these charismatic. No, we can bring the gospel in power with the Holy Spirit to bear on every different place. Yeah. And like you were saying in your sermon, I'm assuming that you were speaking from that, is that the gospel changes the way I look at you.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly
the
where
rules
we ended
don't.
Up. Right.
They just tell me you've done a bad job or you're doing a good job. The gospel tells me you're loved, and I'm called to love you.
Because within our church, the prerequisite to being a Christian is to admit that you are so utterly riddled by sin that you don't have any hope.
Right.
That's the way. If you're wondering, how do you come to the village? How do you go? Not come, but how do you
become a follower of Jesus?
Yeah. How do you become a follower of Jesus? And that's where it starts. Is you realize I can't fix this in myself.
Right.
It's worse than I want to admit. It's so pervasive and I can't fix it. Okay, so then now you're in a great position to understand you need mercy. You need help. And God is full of mercy and grace. And so that all the way back in the Old Testament, when you first hear the name of God, it's, the Lord, and it's a God of mercy.
Right.
Filled with steadfast love and forgiveness.
Right.
And so, but by nature, the community of the church is people who are guilty of stuff. Right. But you've been given this amazing gift of forgiveness and acceptance, and then you're brought into a family, and you're considered part of, you have an inheritance in the kingdom of God. You're brought in. You're united. You're changed, and your only hope is in Jesus. And so, within our church, that's exactly the discussion is because we all have the same Savior to whom we're eternally grateful, without whom we'd have no hope. And because he's given us a common, he's bound us together as family. We can't view each other the same. We can't look at each other as objects which to just satisfy myself.
Right.
It changes our view of each other. And then I went further to say that because the kingdom of God, as kind of worked out in the scriptures, Psalm 24, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness of it,
right.
All of its people. And so since the kingdom of God is God wants his goodness to be known throughout the earth, and he wants to restore things. So that's where our justice and our vengeance can't restore anything, but God actually says he will restore things.
Right.
And so if that's true, this is a worldwide hope.
Yes, and I think that was key. I was waiting for you to say that one word.
Yeah. A worldwide hope. So that means that we start treating people who aren't within the community as brothers and sisters.
Yes. As
we're giving people a taste of the kingdom. So we worked out the idea of when Jesus says, be the salt of the earth, be the light of the world. I mean, he's saying salt is something everybody wants. Your mouth's designed for it. You have taste receptors. You crave it. Even if you can't have it, you want it. You do.
Right.
Everybody does.
Right.
And light is something we want. I remember my architect buddy, Michael, taught me about ocular centrism, that when you're an architect, you want light in the room to draw people in. Everybody's drawn to light. We want it. And so when people see, because we all long for righteousness, which is why we're trying to do this Puritan thing.
Right.
But when people see people who love, without exploitation, which is a miracle.
Right.
An absolute miracle that can only happen through Jesus. Who don't objectify, who do this stuff that's something that the whole world's wanting.
Right.
And so we've got to raise up people whose hearts are changed, who start treating people in their community the way Jesus would treat them.
Right.
There's power. Now that's a slow-moving process that happens. It's, it requires you admit that you're absolutely corrupted by sin and that you're abusive and that all those things.
Well, I think some of the things that you've said in, so you were talking about when you went back to Hugh Hefner. So, what the culture says is that it's about me.
Right.
But the gospel says it's always about Jesus.
Absolutely.
And what we don't believe is that that's freeing.
Yeah. That sounds constraining.
Right.
But when it's about me, you end up in a prison.
Yeah, entangled in your own lies and your own suspicions.
And you can't see the truth about yourself.
No, and it's dark.
Yeah.
And so I think but that's the cost of the gospel.
Yeah.
It really is not, I can't believe that God had a son, the Son of God is God, and all the complexities of the Trinity.
Right.
Actually, the brain is pretty easy. That makes sense.
And
What's hard is me.
Once you're able to, that's why Jesus always started with stuff like, okay, will you sell everything you own and follow after me? He didn't start off with hey, let's work out the doctrine of the Trinity, or whatever.
You know? And when asked by John the Baptist, is it you? He's like, well, the blind can see.
Yeah. Yeah, he didn't even give him a clear answer.
Right. Well, he's saying, the evidences are here. Why are you asking this question?
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's a big part of it, is the cost is to say, okay, it's not about me.
Yeah.
It's about Jesus. And he says his burden is light.
Yeah.
And I think that's a powerful, because the burden of my sexuality is heavy.
Very heavy.
And if I begin to worship it and nurture it and look at it and feel oppressed by it and not to know what to do with it, it becomes destructive.
And for that matter, the burden of being good is very heavy. Like, the burden, like, when you look at, I mean, you know, when you start going out there, like, I've been feeling this on, like, the race and the sexuality, and, like, you feel this, like, oh no, like, am I doing well enough in the race category? Am I doing well enough in the sexuality category? And those are just two big categories right now. And there's all these other ones, like, what about all my business practices? And what about, do I always tell the truth? And if you're trying to live up to that, oh my gosh, it's crushing. And and you can't carry that burden. You can't do it.
No.
Nobody can. And that's why just the stuff like stop it, that just adds to the load.
Yeah.
It's like, oh no, here's another area. Unless you're blind to it.
Right.
Unless you're deluded and think I'm really good.
Right.
I'm really righteous. And the truth is you're not. Right. And starting, like, when you can admit that I'm not, but Jesus was, and he offers his righteousness for and that costs you everything, because it's no longer you and you're not proud of yourself, but it gives you the absolute freedom to change.
Yeah.
And to know Jesus and to be reconciled to people. And actually, at the end of the day, you know, if Jesus is onto something here, which we think he is, then he actually restores that which is broken.
Yeah. So let's ask a practical question, because
Yeah.
I got a 12-year-old son
Yeah.
and a 16-year-old daughter
Yep.
who live in this world.
Yep.
Right? So they're told certain things about sexuality. They're told certain things about value as a male or a female. They're told certain things about what power is. So we have these things. And then they're growing up in a gospel church, in a kingdom church. How do we, both inside our community and then releasing them into the culture, help them grow up in a way that they can understand these things in practical ways and apply them to their lives? Because my experience has been that growing up in a church that's for young women is that they've been told as Christian in the fundamentalist end is that you have to be very careful in the way that you dress and the way. So there's all these procedures and steps.
And same for men. Like I'm you know, I've worked with young men forever, and it's like, and the message is usually try really hard, stop. Don't look at women. Don't look at any, you know, if there's a Vanity Fair magazine,
turn it over.
Turn it over.
All the ones over in the magazine.
Right.
Yeah.
Whatever. It's just like try.
Yeah, and then, you know, all the other things that go along with that. So Brian's not here for the
only
training.
Brian was here, but you know,
point.
like the same effect might happen if we were to ask him for his input. Brian?
Brian? What's going on? Okay.
He didn't say anything. Okay.
Oh man. So for me, the approach to all of this is with a 16-year-old girl is that she, on one hand, has to understand that she is becoming a woman, that God created her as a sexual being, that very sexuality is alluring,
right,
and tantalizing and arousing.
Yeah.
Right? These are things that are good. They're not bad things.
But she should understand that.
Yeah, she needs to understand that. As a young... For my son, it's helping him understand that he's got similar things and that both of them respond.
Yeah.
So those are all things that just saying that these are okay, I think, is the first step of the gospel in some ways, of just saying this is the way you were created.
Yeah.
Because part of the gospel is not
you
just...
shouldn't be ashamed of it. Right.
Yeah, it's living out the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And repenting when you don't. But so I think there's that. But I think there is a picture of being a woman and being a man that is just not well developed yet.
Yeah, you're right.
It's counter to the traditional Christian way of talking.
Gosh. Yeah.
And counter to the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, for instance, a very practical thing. I grew up always thinking, okay, every time I see a pretty girl walk by, and any girl walk by, and that I'm supposed to avert my eyes, I'm not supposed to look. That I'm
and how weird is that?
And
super weird.
My co-pastor, the guy we know well, Rod, he helped me walk through that early on in our ministry, and just saying, look, like, God created this woman, she's beautiful.
Yeah.
You should say, this woman is beautiful.
Right.
Don't avert your eyes. Say, God, thank you for beauty.
Yeah.
Thank you for sexuality, and then move on.
Yeah.
Worship God for what He's created and leave it alone.
I had a friend years ago who said something to the same effect of, when you see a beautiful woman, instead of either like acting like you don't, like just watching them and indulging in that, or acting like they don't exist, which is weird, he said, look them in the eye and say hello.
Yeah.
And like engage and then treat them like a human being, and that and that changes everything. And
I talked to my daughter about there is a power to a young woman who understands that her physicality brings a particular kind of power into a room, understands how to treat that so it's not it's not there flaunting it and saying, I want you to devour me, I'm offering myself. And enjoying the pleasure of being enjoyed without the pleasure of offering to be devoured.
Right.
And that's a thing that you have in art. It's a craft.
Well, it's funny because the thing I just thought of was art. Like, and this is, if God is a creator, then that is exactly what we are.
We are art, yes.
And it's beautiful art must be acknowledged as such, yes. Right? But is not to be what's a tragedy is when like that piece of art that was stolen from the U of A, where somebody says that must be mine and mine alone, and I will take it and I will put it in my dark room of my home, and it will be just mine and no one else, like, and it's about me, I get it. Belongs to me. Like, that's, oh my gosh, now that's an acknowledgement of beauty that goes into, it's selfish and it's wicked and it's terrible, and we all celebrate when it's undone, but the beauty of the art isn't supposed to be hidden or treated as if it's not such, right?
Okay. And I think I think what culture wants to say is that men and women are the same,
right, and
that they just have these differences that are very, very minor.
Right.
But I think even in a gospel world, men and women are different.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not, I'm not talking about complementarian and egalitarian. There's just a difference in the way that the art has been formed.
Yeah.
And so when it's seen and enjoyed, it brings a different power, a different creativity, and it's something that we're supposed to revel in and enjoy. And a man can walk into a room and offer it to be devoured, or offer it to be enjoyed. And I think that those are, it's not any different. That part's not different. It's just a different kind of art. And I think the thing is, we don't like abstraction.
Yeah.
But God's an abstract artist, and He likes to leave things nuanced.
Yeah.
And I think that's hard for us. We want it all lined up. We want all the ducks to be in a row. We want to figure out how to tell our young women and our young men how to behave and do what they're supposed to do. And it's not. It's you get lost in this conversation, it's because the artist doesn't want it all lined out, I think.
Yeah.
And God is beautiful that way.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I don't know if that answers this whole sexual harassment thing, but I do think.
Well, I think that's a huge piece of it because at the end of the day, if it's just stop. I mean, that was one of the confusing things for me is like some of the folks that that I see like reporting about the sexual harassment stuff. I've also seen, in my perception, using their body to get attention.
Sure. Right,
and so it's confusing to me. And so I think we have to have these discussions because I think we're confused.
Right.
Like, we are all confused,
right.
and it's like we've got to know, like, we have these bodies. There doesn't need to be hiding and shame that we are sexual beings, like you're saying. But then at the same time, we're not to exploit it, and it's not to be exploited. But then outside of a framework of God as the artist, I don't think that discussion's even possible.
I agree.
It all is all meaningless. We're just we just develop. We're just animals. It doesn't matter.
Right.
But we're saying to I think churches and to everyone that listens to us, it matters. Like, watch your social media feed. People, they want to have honor and dignity, and for their beauty to be seen as beauty but not exploited, and that points to an artist, and we've got to wrestle with this.
Yeah, right. And I mean, I think we live in this world where chaos, and fear and loneliness are the three things that we battle with over and over again. And maybe you could add a fourth in the sense that if we think we're perfect or okay, then we're in denial.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, and that's really all. And so where our sexuality is in chaos, it's in fear and it's in loneliness. Everything that we struggle with is that way. And so we don't know what to do. There's no answer in culture for this.
No.
Only the gospel answers these questions. Only the gospel brings peace. And I was just on the way here, I was listening to a study by some neurologist who'd just been doing this for 10 years, and he was talking about how our brains, like when we get together, so you and I getting together every week, our brains will line up.
Yeah.
And I begin to want to be more like you, and you want to be more like me.
Yeah.
And so I love that, because when you step into a true community of people who are having this conversation, I want to be more like them.
Yeah.
And then it's true. You see teenagers get together, and you're like, oh my gosh, did they get in the wrong group? Their brain waves are lining up, and it's like, oh, this is not good.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that God has designed in us.
Oh yeah. Which is why community is so important, right? Like,
hugely important.
And I'm always bringing up the book "You Are What You Love" by James K.
Yeah,
Smith.
we both love that book.
Great, but I mean, essentially, he's saying, in order to view things the way that we're talking about, you need a community that trains you, to believe these true things about God and trains you to live out of them. And you need rhythms and patterns because you're being shaped to love something. And if it's yourself, you will exploit.
Yeah.
If you begin to love God, especially through the gospel, you will love and sacrifice.
Yes.
And that is hard, and it takes a lifelong community. But like you're saying, like we're designed for community. That's how it happens. That's how we change.
Right.
If we're in a community of exploitation, we exploit.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I'm not here to say all churches. A lot of churches are communities of exploitation.
I agree.
And I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But just because somebody puts a cross on the building and reads the Bible doesn't mean they're walking with Jesus and trusting and believing the gospel deeply.
Well, and let's just be honest. The Village and Mission Church are churches of exploitation.
Yeah. Because we're all. It's a struggle.
And it's a group of broken people trying to follow Jesus.
Yeah.
And embracing the forgiveness, but we do exploit.
Yep.
We do take advantage. We do play politics. We do all of these things.
Yep.
Because power is an evil force. It's a neutral force, but evil has attached itself to it,
and which is why, like at both of our churches, I mean, we confess that we have these issues every week, right? And we need people in our community to say, hey, you're blind to it here, actually. You don't confess enough.
Yeah, no, and I think one of the things that I try to say, and it's hard for me to say, is that I am disappointing.
Yeah.
I'm very disappointing to you guys, and you will be disappointing me, and I have backed away in fear in some of your guys' lives. And so if you join the Village, don't expect me to be perfect, but expect me to be held accountable.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to have that, even though it's terrifying. But I want you to know that there's this. The good is not because we've mastered some cool community. The good is because we're just going to hang on to this cross, and look towards the resurrection and the hope.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite scriptures from Paul's, where he says, "Follow me as I follow Christ."
Yes.
And some you could take that to mean I follow Christ perfectly. Follow me.
Right.
I take that to mean I'm following after Jesus, which means I'm always repenting of the wrong things in me, and I'm always stumbling and needing His mercy and His grace. But in following Him, I'm a recipient of mercy all the time. So don't look at me, look at Jesus. I'm trying to follow Jesus, and He's being really gracious toward me. Right. So for whatever reason, I'm a pastor of a church. I'm still not quite clear on that.
Right.
But
well, maybe because God's power is manifest in weakness.
In weakness, yes. But I want people to look to Jesus.
Yeah.
There are times, days, this morning, last night when I wasn't doing it, and I'm sorry, and I need my church to walk with me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, because it's not just repenting and saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I messed up. Oops." It's saying, "No, I want to be conformed to the likeness of Christ." But obviously, yesterday, 5 minutes ago, I was not.
Yeah.
And so, how did I impact you? What can I do differently? How can I?
Yeah.
I understand that I'm forgiven for this, so I need to step into what is good
and not hide it.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've said a lot here.
Whew.
So, thanks for joining us for breakfast. Thanks to the folks at XO Coffee here in Tucson, Arizona, for letting us set up in the loft. And we'll be back with you next week.
Thanks, Andy.